And how we doing? Welcome to Common Good Immigration. We're a group that traveled along the southern border on bicycles. Believe it or not, this dad bod rode like 500 miles on a bicycle along the southern border. But we met so many great people, and we want to help tell their stories and just bring some awareness to what life along the border really is like and how border practices impact us right here in South Bend as well. So we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to share some stories, a little bit of music, and also some film that we shot while we were down along the border. So we're creating a documentary along the way. We're still filming that documentary, so if you're good, you can maybe be a small part of it. But we're going to show the trailer right now, and I hope you enjoy the evening with us. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to introduce you now to our preacher today, Doug Padgett. Doug is a national speaker, he's a writer, he's a pastor, he's got this wide imagination that you're going to have the opportunity to hear about today.
We are going to do this ride that Julio mentioned, where we're going to ride our bikes from San Diego across the country to St. Augustine, Florida. We're going to do that along and as near to the U.S.-Mexico border as we can to bear witness to the experience of people. It's going to take us 67 days to do this.
Our primary effort is to take the stories that we learn along the border and to tell them over time with people around the United States.
They killed her husband, and they have nowhere to go.
Especially in places that we think the political opinion about the border could really have impact on who we are as a country and who represents us.
Republicans have made a deliberate effort to talk to religious voters, and we really believe many evangelical voters really do want to find a new option.
This is the way we choose in this country to manage this part of the border, is to make this desert so deadly that if anyone crosses here, they're going to suffer in the desert.
Todos son muertos.
Todos.
We're 400 feet to a water tank and 800 feet to the road. Just didn't quite make it.
The systems that are created, they didn't just exist. Someone made them. And if we made them, we can change them.
Hey, I'll add my greeting. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. My name is Doug Padgett. Really glad to have you here with us. We've been traveling since last Friday showing that trailer, and so you're like the fourth group that has actually seen it. We're going to make a documentary, as Dan mentioned, about the work that we're doing. And not only are we going to make a documentary, we're actually making the documentary still. So thank you for being here to watch portions of it and to hear the people's stories that are featured in it. But you're also part of it in its own way. You're going to see Kim with a camera moving around. You'll see Clayton over here. So we're still making the documentary because part of the documentary is us talking to the people around the rest of the United States, because we believe that immigration is not only an issue for people who live on our southern border, but it's an issue for all of us. Part of the reason we call this the We the People ride is we're trying to ask that fundamental question. Who's included in the we of we the people in this country? And we wanted to raise the issue of common good immigration and border practices. Now, I'll tell you, that was a new thing for me when I first went to the border a few years ago, to find out the way our Border Patrol treats people, the way the Border Patrol makes decisions about people's lives and how they're impacted. It's a significant part of the story. You're going to hear some of that tonight. And so we wanted to focus not only on the policies of immigration for those who are in the United States, but what about the immigration policies and practices of those who are yet to be in the United States? Asylum seekers, refugees, those who are commanded to remain in Mexico. So that's what we're doing. Now this ride, it makes, we rode 3,156 miles from San Diego, California, along the coast of, along the border of the United States and Mexico, and then along the coast all the way to Florida. And you might think, well, you all must have been like superhero bikers. Maybe you did this because you're really into biking and you just wanted to bike across the country one time and you decided to make a documentary about it. That's the furthest thing from the truth. I came up with this idea that we'd bike and make a documentary about this. I didn't own a bike that you could ride across the country, so I had to go buy a bike. The kinds of people that came with us, some for a day, some for a week, some multiple times, we're just all a bunch of ordinary people. We didn't bike along the border because we're super into biking. We biked along the border because we wanted to get as close as we could to feel, hear, and taste this land. We saw so many incredible things. We're going to show you some of those tonight in film. We looked at that big wall so many times. We saw it in California, and we saw it in Arizona, and we saw it in New Mexico, and we saw it in parts of Texas. We saw the beauty of the Rio Grande as well, which is the demarcation of the border. That border wall becomes a character in this thing. I have come to despise it all that I can. You can form your own opinion as we go. We met with Border Patrol and asked them their views. We met with ranchers. We met with migrants. We met with people who work in different organizations. We saw people being detained on our ride right there in the middle of the desert. We met with people who nearly died in the desert. We traveled in an RV. We slept outside in tents, sometimes in hotels, sometimes in RV parks. We had a little support vehicle with us. We were doing all that we could to keep ourselves aware and attentive, knowing all the while that whatever kind of difficulty we were having, it was nowhere close to the experience of people who had to cross our borderlands and make their way through the desert. So we weren't trying to experience what they experienced. We were trying to experience something that would allow us to have eyes to see and ears to hear the stories that they were wanting to share with us. So we want to share with you some of these stories. We're also going to do a little trivia tonight. It gets a little heavy at times, frankly, and you're going to hear from a lot of people. So there's times where we're going to ask you to turn on that analytical part of your brain as well. It's almost like little commercial breaks as we go. So here's our question, our first question. What percentage of Americans say that immigrants strengthen the country because of their hard work and talents, as opposed to saying that somehow they're taking something away from our country? Now, when you came in, you probably got a little piece of paper and maybe a pen, or hopefully you did, and we'd like you to write your answer down and then hold your card up. If you didn't write your answer down or don't have a pen, you can still hold your card up and wave it if you got it right, because it's kind of the participatory part of the evening. So, what percentage of Americans say that immigrants strengthen our country because of their hard work and talents? Is it 24%, 48%, 66%, 82%? Write it down or lodge it in your mind, your answer. And when you're ready, the answer, what percentage of Americans say immigrants strengthen our country, is 66%. Hold up your card if you got that one right, whether you wrote it down or not. All right, now it's not quite 82%, right? But it's not 24% either. One of the things we want to do is help people through this documentary to see some other things. We want to move that number. We think it's possible to move that number. The reason we're doing a documentary is that documentaries just sort of do something to us. In fact, how many of you have watched a documentary in the last month or so? Yeah. And then how many of you have talked to somebody else about the documentary that you watched? And then how many of you that watched the documentary and told someone about it were like, I don't know why you're not as excited about this documentary as I am, right? It's a common experience. We want this to be part of the conversation that you're able to have with people about immigration, our border practices, and who we are and how we should act as a country. So that's what we're up to. We're super glad that you're here with us. We learned a few things on this ride, and I'll just mention three of them right now. One is, the border is not nearly as dangerous as people say that it is. Once you get there, you hear a different story. Second thing we learned, It is extremely dangerous if you're a migrant. It's not dangerous if you're a U.S. citizen or living on the U.S. side of the border. It's extremely dangerous if you're an immigrant. We're often told the inverse of that story, that the border is dangerous for Americans because of the people that are crossing. The truth is, it's not dangerous for American citizens along the border because the people crossing are being victimized by our policies. They're not the people that we need to be afraid of. This became true over and over. You're going to see that in some of the footage. And the third reality that we experienced was that my watch is now talking back to me. The third experience that we had was small nonprofit organizations, people taking it upon themselves to help the people who are hurt by United States government policies. So our government is riding on the backs of small nonprofits to solve the problem created by our government, and we think the government should get off the back of our small nonprofits and let them care for the people and not be making it worse on people. So those are some conclusions that we've made, and we'd be interested in you drawing your own conclusion over the course of the night. I'm going to show you this little piece. It comes from Mission, Texas. We were riding toward McAllen. We were on about a 50-mile bike ride that day, and we came upon this honky-tonk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, sort of out in the middle of nowhere, and this is the piece of that story.
You're riding bike?
Bicycles, yeah, that's our bikes up there.
Oh, wow.
I think this is the border, guys. Right? Yeah. We are legally crossed it.
We started riding in San Diego.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We're going into Reynosa, Mexico tomorrow, and
You're going into Reynosa,
yeah,
huh?
we work with people that do humanitarian work with migrants and
so
asylum
you've got
seekers.
people with you.
Yeah.
Because Reynosa's not a really good place. Now you can go in Progreso, you don't need anybody with you. But if you're going to go to Reynosa, you need people with you.
Yeah, we work.
I'm originally from Minnesota, but I just let them know those people
there as
over
a
there
kid?
are Minnesotans.
These two sitting
Yeah,
at the table?
they just bought the valley. They're from northern Minnesota.
I was just thinking about it when you came over. I'm looking around going, this is just like any other town in the States that you go to. You want to go have a beer, you go have a beer, there's great music. This just happens to be right on the border. I mean, you can't get any closer to the border than there. And it's no different. I mean, yeah, there are issues,
Yeah.
but I think for the most part, people just carry on, you know.
Yeah. So many people in Minnesota would be afraid to come to the border. Maybe you've
Absolutely.
heard it too. Have you heard
Absolutely,
people tell you
yes,
that you
yes.
should be afraid to come
Are
here?
you really going down the mission? Well, yeah. We've enjoyed it so far. Matter of fact, in 10 days, we bought a house here. So we're going to be here 7 months, and in northern Minnesota, 5 months.
And all this stuff about worry about the border, all the stuff you hear, that didn't cause you to wait?
No.
Like you decided to do it now?
No, yeah, time was right for us to sell.
I'm heartbroken every time. I mean, the river has been the life force of the Rio Grande, and it's been shared by both sides, and you negotiate the border. Then a wall comes up, and it just says something else. What do you think?
There's got to be a better way. I don't know what it is, I guess, or I may be gone before that's found.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
That was an experience that we had over and over, running into people who said, we live here. It's not what everyone says. We had this one question we asked everyone we met. What do you know about life on the border from living here that you wish people in the rest of the country knew? And they would say over and over, please tell people it's not what they've heard. Ask them to come here. That man, I'm from Minnesota. That's why I was so interested in talking to that man. His life in northern Minnesota is almost as far away north as you can get from that wall in McAllen, Texas. And he's trying to say to everyone he knows. Now, I talked to a lot of people in that bar. Every one of them that I met offered up that they were a Trump supporter. And they also said, we think that wall is a ridiculous idea, or some version of that. So the stories of the people who live closest are not always the stories of people who want to talk about other people who live on and near the border. That's one of the stories that we want to tell. All right, a little piece of trivia, and then you're going to meet Dora Rodriguez, who we met along our ride. You're going to see a video from her, and she's also going to be right here. So what percentage of Americans then say that immigrants are invading our country and replacing our culture and ethnic background? Make your guess on your card. 15%, 31%, 42%, 57%. What percentage of the American population says, look, somehow we're going to lose our American culture due to immigration? Got your answer in your head? And the answer is 31%. Hold your cards up and wave them around. I don't know how that makes you feel, but I don't know. I felt kind of good about that because there's days where I think, I don't know, it could have been 57%. Not sure how to think about if 31% is a good number, but here's what I do think a lot about because of the work that we do as an organization. It's not just a random number there, 31%. Actually, white evangelical Protestants, 59% think that the immigrants ruin our country and are taking away our ethical. That really strikes me personally because I am an evangelical pastor. Now, I come from the progressive side of that. I'm inclusive. I want to include people in our faith, and I want our faith to be good for the world. I want to have immigration that's open and caring for people. But the people of my faith community, 59%. Republicans, 57%. And then other breakdowns. So it doesn't always break easy. Part of the work that we want to do is to have intentional conversations with people who think differently about the border and try to engage those people in meaningful and lively conversations. So we hope that you'll feel part of that too. All right, I mentioned to you that you're going to hear from Dora Rodriguez. This is some of the work that she does. We met Dora in Arizona and then spent some time with her and with the footage that you're going to see in a little place called Sasabe, Mexico, right across the border from Sasabe, Arizona. In fact, very often you have towns that are split by the border. Sometimes the same name, sometimes different names. McAllen, Texas, and Reynosa, sister cities split by the border. Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Mexico. Sasabe, Arizona, Sasabe, Mexico. They're divided by the wall. So this wall is not only separating countries, it's separating communities that used to feel as one. It's a decision we have to make as a country, is that the way we want this to go? But here is a glimpse of the life of Dora Rodriguez.
Solo métalo un ratito en el agua, ¿ok? Que Dios le bendiga, hijo. Por lo menos vino aquí para que nosotros le demos una manita, oye. Lo siento mucho, de verdad.
6 días en el desierto.
Qué horrible, hijo, por Dios, qué horrible.
3 días estuve en la línea esperando a entrar. Y ahí la comida se estaba terminando, por eso se me agotó todo. Suero, Gatorade.
Lo
Ya
siento.
el agua ya no.
Que vamos a dejar que se seque un poquito, ¿ok? Ay, perdón.
No, es que mis rodillas.
So he's hurting because he was with friends, but his 3 friends were able to walk with no problem, but he got his feet horrible. And I'll show you why, because the shoes that the smugglers give these people are horrible. This is how cheap they are, and every single pair of shoes that they get from the smugglers causes those blisters. So part of his story is very tragic, and it's very common that they get hurt and the group leave them behind because they want to go, they're going to do their journey, but the person who stay behind is when they risk their life to die. And this is what high school kids are doing, all the way in
Providence, Rhode Island.
yes, beautiful. So I mean, I'm so thankful. And they write these beautiful notes, and they put $20 for them so they can have some money for their journey. ¿Usted la leyó, la notita que le hizo la niña? ¿La leyó? La notita. Una niñita de 14 años escribió eso.
Querido amigo, hola, mi nombre es Katy. Soy estudiante en los Estados Unidos y tengo 14 años. Entiendo que tu vida...
Lo siento mucho. Muy linda. Que tu vida vale mucho, ¿verdad? Y la vida después puede incluir desafíos y luchas, dice. Encuentra salud y felicidad y éxito. Espero que tu viaje sea seguro por ayudar e incluido una donación para que en cualquiera de tus necesidades te deseo suerte. Con amor, Katy. Una niña de 14 años. Okay? This is beautiful. This is what these kids did. It's beautiful. Usted entró aquí por Sázabe, ¿verdad? ¿O entró por altar?
Por altar. Todos son muertos.
Todos. Todos, todos. Todo lo que usted ve rojo son todos los muertos que hemos encontrado desde el año entre 1999 hasta ahora. Hemos encontrado 3.862 muertos en estos desiertos. ¿Sí?
Ok, gracias.
Dios me lo bendiga, hermano.
Está igual.
Guatemala.
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 Él es mi hijo.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for spending time with us. This is a great space to share my story and the story of so many. Before I start with my little story, I would love to ask you if you can please have a moment of silence or reflection or quietness to honor our brothers and sisters who are dying in our deserts, trying to flee violence, trying to find safety, trying to find a better life for their family. And if you can please join me for a minute of silence. Thank you so much. So, my story is the story of so many, too many. And my story happened 41 years ago. I was only 19 years old when I fled a civil war from my country, El Salvador. I was only 19 years old. Now you know the math, you know how old I am. That's okay. And you know, the war in my country killed more than 75,000 people, children, women. It lasted for 12 years. And I left my mother behind, my brothers, my sister, my culture, my dreams. I left everything that belonged to me in a backpack because I have to give my life another chance. If I would have stayed in my country, the death squad would have killed me because I was 19. I had just finished high school. I wanted to go to the university. I wanted to become a social worker. I belonged to a group of religious nuns in my town, the Maryknoll Sisters, who were killed later on in El Salvador. So I knew my life was in danger. And as I said, none of us flee their country, leave everything behind because it's fun. People leave their country because it's a reason. And many, many times it's life and death. So it's really hard, to talk about my story over and over, but it is important. As I share, many nights we've been doing this, I, sometimes change a little things because it's a lot to tell. But in my group, I came in July 1980 in a hot summer in Arizona. In Arizona can reach up to 117 degrees. We're right now, today is 98 degrees. And I'm freezing in here. We're desert rats. So you can imagine how hard it was. I didn't know anything at that time by anything how the desert was, the dangers of the desert, what happened if you are in the desert 7 days wandering around without water. Food is not that important at that time, but water is. And it was 26 of us, children, women, men. 45 of us left together in a bus from El Salvador. But by the time we got down to the border, north, they separated us, and they took the women and children to Yuma, Arizona. And us, the young people, middle age, but they didn't know that they had a pregnant woman in my group. And they had 3 sisters, 12, 14, and 16, who were coming to reunite with their mother in Arizona, in California. So by the 6th day, 13 of my friends have died around me. And for some reason, I survived. Within half an hour, they say, if they wouldn't get to rescue us. So life is interesting because it takes us to different paths. And people ask me, why do you do this every day? Because it's my passion, it's my reason, it's my healing. This is how I heal my heart. And I cannot imagine doing anything else but this. Creating awareness, because 41 years later, we are in the worst situation with immigration laws. And with immigration laws so corrupted, so unlawful, I mean, the last president created laws that had killed thousands of people in our deserts because they are denied the right for asylum. They are denied the right for a better life. So the fact that this government asks our people who qualify for asylum to go back to Mexico and wait in Mexico in the border towns where they are victimized by cartels, women are going through so many horrible things in those areas, children. So, it's just, how can we not stand up in here and say, this is wrong? This is not okay, what's going on in our country. And I say my country because I became a citizen after 10 years. So when I say my story, I said, you know, for years, my story was quiet. It was in my heart. It's traumatic, it's painful. It hurts to talk about it because those 3 sisters that I saw dying near to me, they were my good friends, and I couldn't do nothing for them. The woman that was pregnant, that I heard her last breath, I couldn't do nothing for her. So it was my story and our story. But when 2016 arrived, and I heard in national television, worldwide, that we migrants are rapists, we're killers, we're up to no good, we're bringing drugs and guns, I said, Dora, this is your time. You have to open your mouth. You have to create awareness. You have to tell your story. And I have not stopped, and I won't stop. So in 2019, we get hit by the pandemic, 2020. Right when the pandemic was, well, when the last president decided to tell us that we have a pandemic, we went to the border town of Sasabe, Sonora. And then before I went, I already knew that, who knows about Title 42? Title 42 is a law that protects group of people when it's a pandemic, but it's a medical. It's from the, how do you say it? CDC, yes, thank you. Sometimes I need help. From the CDC department. Even the president from the CDC says this has nothing to do with immigration. But the last president used that against our borders and our migrants and our asylum seekers. So what that does is that anybody that is arrested in those areas crossing is detained and immediately take back to Mexico. And they are taken back to areas where, like Sasabe, Sonora in Mexico, where that town only has 2,500 people, local people, who love their little town. But when I went and visited, the crisis that we hear in this country, in the television and everywhere, is not here in our states, it's in Mexico, in the border towns. And I witnessed 150 people being deported every single day to a town where there's no medical help, there's no resources, there's no transportation, not even for the local people, there's no hospital, no shelters, nothing. And they were deporting families, children, women. A woman from Guatemala with her baby in her back. You know how they wrap their babies in those beautiful wraps. With that 3-month-old baby and a 3-year-old walking for 12 hours in our desert, seeking asylum. And this agent just stopped her and sent her back. So all that I was witnessing, and we started delivering donations immediately. You know, we were asked if we could help because we were delivering donations in the street. And an agent from Mexico approached me, and he says, "Can you help us?" And so we did. We came back and we gathered, everybody could help us. We started asking for money, because you can have this big old heart, but if you don't have the money, it's very tough. Very tough to carry this on. But it was great. We started delivering 700 bags of food every week. But, you know, like in December of 2020, coming back, I say to the group of women that we were doing this, you know what, we have to change this. This is not okay. The world needs to know that this is criminal. Our government is doing something that is not acceptable, because it's against the law to deport people where there's no services. So we were asking that at least to take them to an area where they can have some services. Because the young guy that you saw in the video, he was already nice and clean because he had already showered in our shelter, in our center. But he came with different clothing when he came to us. So coming back, we had that conversation and we start getting all the newspapers, all the people that we know. It's good to know people and know places, like I said. And then we got all these people coming and, asking questions, what's going on in Sasabe, what's going on? And we say, well, more than 700 people is being deported every week in this place. And they're sleeping in the street. It was very, very cold. It can reach 20 degrees at night. And they're sleeping in porches and people's front yard and the plaza. So we decided to call somebody from the New York Times. And they came. That women flew the next day. And our article came in December 14. And I tell you, December 15, our numbers went from 150 to 34, 40 the most. So we did that piece. And then we continued donating, doing donations in the street. Well, like at the end of December, we said we need to have a structure, a place where we can bring some dignity back to our people who often come to us with no shoelaces, no belts, and their belongings in plastic bags, in blisters, twisted ankles, dehydrated, thorns. So my story is repeated often and often and often. But that's how Casa Esperanza came alive. Organizing with local community, they were happy that we were helping because they didn't even know what to do with all these people that our Border Patrol was sending them. So now we have a center that provides that dignity back. We provide shower, a hot meal, change of clothes, phone call to their loved ones. And if they want to go back home, we provide them with the bus ticket to go back home because so many of them are done. And this is what Title 42 and Remain in Mexico has done, is increase the business for the organized crime in those areas. They are making millions and millions and millions of dollars from this tragedy. So please help us to spread the word, help us to continue the fight until we see more humane policies. We can do it, because we are a better country than that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dora. You're going to hear in a little bit from Alma, who we met along the way, too, and these are women that we met as we traveled. We didn't know who we would meet, and we're so grateful that you'll be willing to then travel this part of the country with us, too, to tell the stories that need to be told, not only in the borderlands, but, in the Midwest, even when you're in the jewel of the Midwest. And I can say that as someone from Minnesota, that here in South Bend, it's the jewel of the Midwest. We need to tell these stories. And we all, once you've woken up, then it's time to speak up and to stand up. And Dora, we're so proud to be able to join you in some of that work. A trivia question for you. Since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, so this is a decision made by our federal government to take our border in a different direction. The federal government has spent how much money on the agencies that carry out immigration enforcement? $700 million, $1 billion, $10 billion, $333 billion. How much have we spent in this big question of, well, if we finally secure the border, then we can talk about immigration reform? Make your guess, write it down, lock it in your mind. $333 billion. We seem to find the money for things that feel like they matter to some people in this country, $333 billion. When we're done, spend some time with Dora and ask her how much money she gets to deal with the results of this $333 billion spent. It's part of the thing that we want to raise. We also met a woman named Sister Lika in Nogales, Mexico, and really glad for you to see part of her story. She's not here tonight, but it'll feel like she is when you see her beautiful spirit.
El centro Casa de la Misericordia y de todas las naciones, lo que nos dedicamos es ayudar a las personas con mayor vulnerabilidad en su vida. En este caso, en este momento es como un albergue, es un refugio para migrantes que están solicitando asilo a los Estados Unidos. La gente que está aquí en su mayoría son mexicanos, muchos vienen de Centroamérica, incluso de Sudamérica, Venezuela, Colombia, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, que van llegando hasta llegar a esos Nogales. La gente que está aquí no está porque quiere. Es gente que ha sufrido o su vida corre peligro y no pueden estar en sus lugares de origen y por eso tienen que dejar sus pueblos, sus casas para buscar una serenidad, una paz que no tienen en sus tierras. Esta mariposa representa la migración, the migrants.
Es la monarca, ¿no?
La monarca. Y para nosotros es como símbolo de la migración. Y al fondo voy a poner cometas. Un niño allá de aquel lado. Un niño con kite.
The United States law is that the only way you can seek asylum is on U.S. soil. You can't ask for asylum in the United States, even if you qualified for it, until you get to the United States and get on U.S. soil.
It's not just a border issue, it's a United States issue. And we're trying to ask the question, who's included in the we the people?
So the reason migrants are coming to the border and then turning themselves over to the Border Patrol is to ask for asylum.
We're a group of pastors that are organizing this and traveling the country. We really want faith voters to care about these issues. We know that a lot of faith voters think one way on Sunday when they're at church and then act another way on Tuesday when they walk into the voting booth.
The We the People ride started in San Diego, California, and now these bikers are going to head on over to check out the migrant situation on the other side before they continue along their journey to Jacksonville, Florida.
I keep thinking about all the times that we have crossed into Mexico, how easily we can enter into Mexico, that the Mexican government just welcomes people like us to come in. And yet, in the United States, we put up razor wire and walls and armed guards and U.S. Army to keep people from coming in. That disparity just haunts me every day that we ride along this border. This doesn't feel as much like a shelter as it does a big family. Can you talk a little bit about how you create a sense of community?
Su situación permanece en un estado de familia. De hecho, nosotros recibimos familias completas, papá, mamá, hijos, mujeres solas con hijos o mujeres solas, que son las más vulnerables o menos espacios tienen donde llegar. Y crear esta comunidad ha sido como una respuesta a la necesidad, ponernos en los pies del migrante, ponernos en los pies de ellos y crear a través de la experiencia con el trabajo de las personas esta posibilidad de vivir en familia.
The word that keeps coming back to me on this ride is the word slander. And partly because in the Christian narrative, that's such an important word, to not slander people, that you don't speak of people in ways that are untrue and that are slanderous. And yet we slander these people who are trying to come to this country by creating all these narratives. The other story we should be telling is that these are survivors, these are heroes to their own family.
These little girls and little boys who look up to their moms and dads who are making their way across other countries to get to safety. Those children are seeing their parents as heroes of their family and heroes of their faith. And we act as if they're the problem.
It was beautiful to spend some time with Sister Lika, and deeply inspiring and also troubling. We got to make music with the kids there, and to see their joy and resilience knowing what they've been through was really something. But these kids shouldn't have to be this resilient. They shouldn't have to flee violence and be met with a closed gate. We call ourselves the greatest country on the face of the planet, and yet we're stingy when it comes to hospitality and welcome. These are policies that we can change. These are laws that were put into place, and they can be unmade and made more just and more humane and more dignified. But it's going to take a lot more people speaking up. I wrote this song as a sort of love letter to the faith tradition I grew up in. I grew up in the Christian tradition, and I've just been deeply disappointed by the lack of care about issues of immigration and welcome. Deeply disappointed by the silence I've heard, and that's what this song is about. I grew up in your churches, Sunday morning and evening service, and knelt in tears at the foot of the rugged cross. You taught me every life is sacred, feed the hungry and clothe the naked. I learned from you the highest law is love. And I believed you when you said I should trust the words in red to guide my steps through a wicked world. And I assumed you'd do the same. So imagine my dismay when I watched you lead the sheep straight to the wolves. You said to love the lost, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth. May love overcome and justice roll down. Oh, they started putting kids in cages, ripping mothers from their babies, and I look to you to speak on their behalf. Oh, but all I heard was silence, or worse, you justified it, singing glory, hallelujah, raise the flag. See, your fear had turned to hatred, but you baptized it with language torn from the pages of the good book. You weaponize religion, and you wonder why I'm leaving to find Jesus on the wrong side of your walls. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Come home, come home. You're better than this. Oh, you're better than this. Come home, come home. You're better than this. Oh, you taught me better than this. And come home, come home. Oh. Maybe I was too naive, or I just didn't want to see. There's always been a little poison in the well, 'cause we sit on stolen lands, a nation built by stolen hands, and we use the Bible to justify it all. Yeah, from slavery and segregation to mass deportations. This is who we are, but not who we have to be. Oh, there's a lot of work to do to pull up the evil by the roots. But repentance has to come before there's peace. You said to love the lost. I'm trying to love you now. You said to speak the truth. That's why I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. May love overcome and justice roll down. And justice roll down. Thank you so much.
Gracias
por hacer esto.
Maria, will you tell us your name and where you're from?
Dinos tu nombre y de dónde eres.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es María. Yo vivo allá en Aldea Timactés, San Matías Tetambo, municipio de... Salí de mi país porque peligro para mí, peligro para mi hijo, y violencias, drogas, violaciones, no hay comidas, secuestradores para mis niños. Mi esposo hace años me dejó, se abandonó, él casó con otra mujer y se abandonó con mis hijos, por eso yo no quiero abandonar mis hijos, yo quiero mantener mis hijos.
¿Cuántos niños tienes?
2.
I have 2 children,
Un varón y una hembra.
1 boy and 1 girl.
How old are they?
¿Cuántos años tienen?
Es mi hijo, trae 11 años.
One is 11.
Mi niña dejó 9 años.
And my girl that is back in Guatemala is 9 years old.
So why is your daughter back in Guatemala?
¿Por qué dejaste a tu niña en Guatemala?
Porque no hay dinero, ya no alcanza mi dinero cuando salí. Por ahora se perdió unos 34,000 quetzales. Porque cuando me trae mis 2 hijos, muchos dineros, sí es difícil. Me quedo triste. Cuando me dejó mi niña allá en Guatemala, estoy triste. Yo quiero luchar por mis niños. Yo no quiero perder mi vida, mis hijos. Allá no hay luz, no hay agua potable, no hay nada. Yo me trabajé día a día. Yo me salí como a las 6 de la mañana. Me llegó hasta las 4 de la tarde. Apenas me gané unos 30 quetzales. No hay dinero, no hay comida. Estoy triste. Ya va 11 años, quedó con mis hijos. Ay, estoy luchando por eso. Yo quiero luchar por mi vida, mis hijos. Yo no quiero.
I wanna keep fighting for the sake of my children.
Yo estoy miedo por aquí. No hay nadie me ayuda, pero gracias.
No, para servirte.
Sí.
When nobody was helping us, nobody looked at us. We are very thankful God sent us because everybody ignores us.
This is your son?
¿Es tu hijo?
Sí, es mi hijo.
Maria Pascual, thank you for sharing with us.
Gracias por ayudarnos.
Gracias. Thank you for helping us.
Te agradezco.
Yo abrazaba a mi niño, rápido salgan allí porque ya varias gentes vamos a cruzar, digo. Y luego salí, bajó del cima de esos, iba corriendo con mi niño porque son peligros también, ahí llegan los más feos también.
Nosotros solo, ellos dicen pues para los coyotes, dicen que cuando nos traen, dicen que nos dan comida, nos dan un autobús para llevarse, pero no era así.
To God of all breath, we ask for love and care and kindness and goodness to these sweet mothers, sons that we've met today. Changed policy for the United States, safety in that plaza, and to put it in the words of Jesus, may your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, because this is not that. So we will say an amen, but it is a paused and broken amen, because this work is unfinished. Amen.
Hi guys, thank you so much for being here on a cold, rainy night, right? And it's amazing you guys live here on your own free will. It's amazing, you know, you choose to be here. Like my friend and colleague Dora, you know, we are from south of the border, and where we have sunshine most of the year, and we are freezing. So this morning we're leaving the hotel, and I have a huge suitcase, like the ones I take donations into the Mexican side of the border. It's like, all of this is yours? I brought my 5 sweaters. So you can see us with sweaters here. And so we are honored to be here, and we are speaking from our heart. We are still recovering from that song, Always Gets Us. I don't know where I'm supposed to be, I move all the time. I am a follower of Jesus. I am a faith-based humanitarian that serves on the Mexican side of the border. And since the first refugee camp that formed within our borders was in Matamoros, I don't know if you heard, under the Trump administration, we created a foreign policy called MPP, Migrant Protection Protocol, which is a sarcastic way to say, we don't know what to do with you asylum seekers, which are below refugee status. So we're gonna send you on the Mexican side of the border that are controlled by organized crime, and you're gonna wait there until we know what to do with you. And that usually means death to our people, the people that we serve, because they're very cruel policies. And all those fancy offices that we have in our capital, in Capitol Hill, and those fancy offices, and you see all those gentlemen, usually white gentlemen, creating policies. They've never been in our borders. They've never been in our borderland. There's almost 2,000 miles from Tijuana, San Diego, to Brownsville, Matamoros, and they've never been there. You know, maybe you've seen Senator Cruz that comes and visit our river, you know, and he thinks that cartel is pointed at him, but it's not, you know, it's just, I don't know, crows or birds or parakeets or whoever, you know. But it is, we live there. I live at the border. I was looking at the bar that my friend Doug was visiting. That's like a few miles from my house. You know, I live at the border. I worship in a local congregation there. I go to school there. My children are there. And I can assure you that the borders are secure. You know, we have thousands of state troopers, we have thousands of National Guards, we have thousands of federal agents with Border Patrol, we have ATF, DEA, FBI, because I go to church with them. I go to school with them. My children have classmates that the Border Patrol kids and federal agent kids that go there. And so I can assure you that the border is controlled. And we are not advocating. I am not. I live there. I am not advocating for saying, let's open our borders, everybody gets in. I don't want to be next door to MS-13. I don't want to be next door to cartel. But we cannot treat women and children with the same harshness that persons or people with criminal backgrounds. We cannot treat them the same way. And as a follower of Jesus, as a person of faith, is what we're doing. We're inviting, especially people of faith, to see and to say, we need to change this. It's not working. Right now, I am based out of McAllen. On the Mexican side is Reynosa, is what is called the Rio Grande Valley. And we have around 3,000 people on a refugee camp that is just meters, just mere feet from the international bridge to go into Texas. The mall in McAllen receives over $1 billion sales from Mexican shoppers. $1 billion sales. The border was shut down. Only American citizens, work visas, and permanent residents were allowed to go by land into the United States. So they opened the border just in time for Christmas shopping, just before that. So for 2 years, I couldn't see my family. I have to go to the Mexican side to see them. I'm a recent immigrant. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico. I have been serving and crossing borders since 1990. And it's the same story. You know, when we tell you these stories, it's because we live them, we are there. I lived at the border. I lived in the Rio Grande Valley. But when we led teams into Slovakia, we led a small team of seminary students from Mexico. And we were meeting with Slovak Border Patrol. And they were telling us, yes, in the spring, we recover remains of people who are frozen to death trying to cross our borders. And just recently, we hosted a team from Duke Divinity School. And we were meeting with South Texas Center for Human Rights. And we went with them to set up water stations. And he was telling us, usually smugglers let them go before the checkpoint. Because did you know that we have land checkpoints? Doug can tell you all about it, and Dan and Shane and everybody that rode on the bikes. Inside the United States, there's land checkpoints. If you want to go, like I live in McAllen, that is right at the border. If I want to go to San Antonio, Texas, I have to go through a checkpoint where military is there, military dogs are there, where you have to show your papers and your documentation, and you have to stop your car in order to keep going. That is inside the U.S. soil. That is inside the United States. And so in order for you to go to Corpus Christi, in order to go to Houston, in order to go to San Antonio, you have to go to checkpoints. And it's the same along the border. And so we were there, and the gentleman was saying, before the checkpoint, the smugglers released them. But they don't know where they're going because there's federal agencies there, so their signal doesn't work. And they can download it, but sometimes they lose their phones or whatever happens, right? So they get lost in ranch lands that are thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. So they die. They die, like Dora was saying. They don't last a long time. So one of my friends, we usually work with women and children. We only help women and children. I'm the only one on the ground. And due to safety concerns, I only work with women and children. Well, one of my friends, Jason, he's from Honduras. Border Patrol released the military dogs that they use. And the dog jumped on him. He got hurt. He was bleeding when he was returned to the Mexican side of the border. And he was praying. It's like, Lord, don't let me be eaten by vultures. My wife is pregnant. I want to meet my baby. And by the grace of God, he was found. We helped him to get medications and medical support. If you come, you can see him. He's still waiting on the Mexican side of the border. He left Honduras because all of his friends were killed by MS-13. And they were not only killed, they were cut in pieces because they didn't want their families to give them a decent burial. So what they're gonna bury, the hand or the leg or the head, and so that's what they do. So he was the only left, and so he emigrated. He has tried to cross several times. He has not been able. We're trying to help him to get an immigration attorney so we can save his life, because now Mexican cartel is trying to get him, to recruit him. He's tall, handsome, young Honduran, very smart. And that's the reality of these little tiny countries. And because foreign policy has created an instability, a lack of stability in this northern triangle of Central America. And one time we took a bus of Mexican seminary students from Monterrey, Mexico to Honduras. Loco idea, don't do that. One time, that's it. And so we were going down, and it's no problem. Coming back, you cross through Honduras, Guatemala, Chiapas, all the way down, and we were on a bus. And we were stopped several times by the military, and it is desperate, the situation in these nations. They're desperate because the level of poverty that they have, it is horrendous. And you know what? You and I can make a difference because, as Dora was saying, we can make a difference with our voice. And if you're a person of faith, through your prayers, through your participation, support the people who are serving on the ground. Like she was saying, we can have a big heart and we can have all the desire to make a difference and save lives. But if we don't have the finances to do it, we can't do it. And we depend on the people like you that care about the situation so we can continue doing this and supporting the organizations like Doug's organization that are organizing these things. It takes a lot of work, a lot of commitment, a lot of energy for them to be doing this. And I'm so thankful I met them by Providence. And we need your help. We need to see how the United States can really be the greatest nations on the planet. How are we going to react, how we're going to respond in this time in history to the crisis that we have in our southern borders. It's the first time we have a refugee camp within feet of international breach into the United States. It's the first time. Never before we have had that. And we need to change that. We need to say this is wrong, human life is sacred, and we need to change the situation. We need to change the policy. And like Doug is saying, and it has really spoken to my heart, if we made those policies, if we created them, we can change them. But it's up to you and me to speak up and to say and to vote. You guys can vote. Please do something about it. I'm a recent immigrant. I have to wait years for my work permit. I have to work 5 years after my work permit to receive my permanent residency, and then 5 years after my permanent residency to become a U.S. citizen. Until then, I cannot vote. So you can vote, and you can help me make a difference on the borderlands. Why? Because the women that you saw, they're still there. Except Petrona, she just crossed a few, the one with the darker skin. She just crossed a few days ago. She's in Alabama, and we're trying to get her an immigration attorney because I'm not sure if you know the difference. Maybe some of my colleagues can explain to you, but a refugee is someone who has been authorized by the United States government to be in the United States. You hear about the Afghan refugees, right? And then they can work, they can live, they have agencies helping them. They are authorized by the United States. Asylum seekers are someone like the women that you saw and the children that you saw that are seeking refuge within our borders. But they cannot request asylum until they are touching U.S. soil. But on our international breaches, in the middle of the breach, on international waters, there's a U.S. checkpoint that you have to show to federal officers that you can cross that little checkpoint. So how are you going to reach the port of entry if they are stopping you in the middle of the breach because you don't have the right documentation? And so it is not a pathway. There's no way that they can do that legally. And that's because as a citizen, right, you don't know that. But please come and see us. Please come and see Dora in Arizona. Please come and see us at the Rio Grande River on the Texas border. We promise to feed you well. You can ask my friends. We have really good Mexican food. And we don't have Taco Bell. But, but we can feed you well. But it's extremely important that you guys come and see with your own eyes. Why? Because in American court of law, a witness is someone that knows what's happening, is someone that has seen it, has knowledge about something in real life, right? You become a witness when you come to our borders. So you can see the wall, I can introduce you to the wall, I can introduce you to the barbed wire that is surrounding all of that, I can show you the state troopers, I can show you the National Guard, I can show you Customs and Border Patrol, and all of those guys that are all along the Rio Grande River, that they're there protecting the border. And then Governor Abbott is calling upon more thousands of National Guard people to come and protect our borders. So we are well protected, I can assure you that. But we need your witness so you can see our wall. And you can see that those women waiting on the other side of the wall are seeking refuge, and they cannot find refuge. So it's up to you and I to change that reality so we can help save their lives. Thank you so much.
Take that. Well, you're going to have a chance to hear from Jesusa here in a moment. I just Googled on my phone, how far is the drive from this location to McAllen, Texas? 1,499 miles. But you don't have to drive 1,499 miles to realize the impact of these issues. Can I do a little trivia before you start? Do you want to do? No, stay here. We'll do it together. All right, we'll do a little trivia together. Crime data from Texas shows that the crime rate for undocumented people in our country is what percent compared to that of native-born Americans? 45% lower, the same, 82% higher, higher by 166%. What's your guess? Yes. Yeah, it does not include claiming that someone has committed a crime by not being documented. Yes, another crime other than that one. Great question. Yes, always question the question. One of the best things in life, question the questions. I love that so much. So crime data says that the crime rate, other than someone claiming that you've committed a crime by simply being, compared to native-born Americans, 45 same, 82, 160% higher, and the answer is 45% lower. We sometimes just simply have to state the realities of what's happening. And thank you. Jesus is here, as is Juan, and they're going to talk about what you can do right here in South Bend around these issues together. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, buenas noches. ¿Es eso? ¿Me escuchan? Ándale, okay. Hi, my name is Jesus Rivera, and I am one of 11 siblings. We are 4 generations of migrant farm workers. Anybody know what a migrant farm worker or a farm worker is? Yes? Good. Both my parents crossed the river, the Rio Grande River, from Mexico to Texas. And basically, they came here for a better life, for more opportunities. They met in the fields, and they had 11 children. So most of us were born in Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Indiana. So kind of doing that little vicious circle there. So I'm a community organizer. You guys know what that is? Awesome. Trained by IAF at Chambers and Mike Geekin. I have a son, 2 beautiful grandboys, and oh, I love that. And a daughter-in-law. You got me on that one. So I began to work in the fields when I was 8 years old. And I think my brother's here too somewhere. Yep, Savino. So a lot of us, started really early. 8 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 7, etc. Alongside by my parents, who didn't speak the language and didn't have the documentation. And because of that, we were treated differently. Going to different schools, people would spit on you. Yes. People would call me nigger, speck, beaner. So that's a reality, right, growing up. And, my mom always would tell us, turn the other cheek. Déjalos, déjalos. Yeah, that's pretty hard to do. There are some pretty big gaps in between what Jesus taught and how some Christians behave. Amen? A little louder, amen?
Amen.
People say that, that they're Christian but don't follow the scriptures. I at least try to do my best, right? I don't know about you, but some of you will get this. I want to live twice and die once. Who gets that? Thank you. Thank you. Amen. So we would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning during the summer and work real late at night, only making dollars a day. We slept in a 2-bedroom shack, no running water, no heat. My parents slept in one room, and 10 of us slept in one bed. Yeah, we're very close now, to say the least, right, Sabina? And so, so this has basically brought me full circle. So I'm trying to do the work that God has called us to do, right? We all have that calling, and I hope I'm doing this right. So I work with farm workers today. Imagine that, full circle. Making sure that they are safe in the fields, making sure that we provide them with the opportunities that we never saw, and moving them from poverty into self-sufficiency, one farm worker family at a time. So I can tell you that a lot has changed, but not a whole lot. Our people are still being mistreated because of the language, because of lack of documentation, because of lack of education, or because they look different like me. They are still being exploited. Just this last week, I found out about a young man who was working. The contractor, he was doing some farm work. The contractor took his documentation. He worked, I don't know how many hours, and was not paid for it. Not really hours, but weeks. And so we reported it, and he's on his way to a U visa. So gladly, you know, that's our job too, to report that when we see it. So they're still being exploited, trafficking, a lot of trafficking, bullied and humiliated. And I see children at the age of 7 still working in the fields. This last summer, you know, Sabina was there with us. We came upon a group picking strawberries early in the morning, and as we walk onto the field, there's a group of children just running back and forth. And so that, you know, that worries me, because one for all, you know, pesticide, trucks going back and forth. And as we walked through the rows of the strawberries, we began to talk to the families. We asked, you know, I asked one of the, she looked older, but she said she was only 7 years old picking strawberries. So enjoy that strawberry shortcake. Also here in South Bend, so, you know, a lot of these things happen in our own backyards. Right here in South Bend, in Plymouth, in Warsaw, in Fulton County, Stark County, Lake County, Porter County, a lot of these issues that we see daily. Here in South Bend, several years ago, I had a call from a group of men, and usually, you know, the contractor will rent one home with 20 to 30 men in one home, 3 bedrooms, and so they're sleeping all over, sleeping on the floor, sleeping on the porch. And so I got a call from these guys, and they said, you know, we haven't been paid in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I'm like, holy shit. So, you know, yeah, I'll be there in a few minutes. So I got there, and they were already out on the porch waiting. And so I asked them, you know, tell me what happened. And they began to tell me, you know, they did this work for this contractor, and they didn't know who the farmer was, but they did the work for the contractor. And I asked them, get a piece of paper, everyone, write down how many hours you worked and how much you think you should get paid. So they did. And so I asked one of them, I need the number for the contractor. So I called him numerous times, 2, 3, 4. No answer. Until probably the 5th or 6th call, he picked up, and we exchanged some words. And I said that I'm here with your crew, and they said they haven't gotten paid, you know, they haven't gotten paid for 3 weeks. And he said, well, you know, it's on its way, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, that's not good enough. So I basically said, if you don't have that pay in their hands by Monday morning, this was Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. granted. If you don't have that pay in their hands by Monday morning, 9 a.m., we're going to have every television station at Sure Farmers at the owner's doorstep. That's what you do, right? That's what you do. You act. You pray, right? But then you act, right? The next day, it was 9 o'clock. I got a call on Saturday morning. Jesus said, we got all our checks. Everything that you were owed? Yes. Okay. So then they were off. They didn't stay until Monday. They left that same day, that Saturday morning. So, you know, we still hear these stories day in and day out. Families having to sleep with bed bugs in Fulton County, drinking rusty water in Elkhart County, and so much happening here in St. Joe. And you guys remember 2020? I heard someone mention about, you know, the COVID in 2020. Remember how we were kind of shut down? We were in our homes, very comfortable, eating our 3 meals, receiving those stimulus checks. Our farm workers were not, because they didn't qualify. So they were still out working, making sure that we were fed our 3 meals. So we were receiving our food, but yet, you know, they needed the work because they needed the money. And they were out there continuing to work. So let me ask you guys, do you know how the food gets to your table? We're talking about it, farm workers, right? Hopefully farm workers. Because it doesn't just magically appear on your plate. Someone has to pick it. Someone has to plant it, pick it, harvest it, pack it, and get it to those supermarkets, right? That's the work that our farm workers do, day in and day out. So when you step into a grocery store, most of the food in the produce aisle or in the dairy has been touched by a farm worker. Think about that. They work so hard under a hot sun during season, 10 to 15 hours a day, sometimes 6 to 7 days a week, yet don't make enough to feed their own families. Sit on that tonight. How is this just? We deserve the same respect and dignity just as anyone else. Amen? And I was always taught, you know, my mom drilled this in our head, Scripture, right? Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you have done to me. That's a powerful scripture, for me at least. So, moving from that, and I promised I wouldn't cry, but it is what it is, right? It's part of the work, being vulnerable. So I just don't work with farm workers. I also work with our undocumented community. Our social justice team out of St. Adelbert Parish, and I see some out of St. Michael's that are here out of Plymouth. Thank you for coming. We were the first to bring the South Bend City ID. Our table began that work for 2 years and managed it. Handed it over to La Casa, they moved it. We are now working on a driver's card for undocumented, the first bipartisan bill, working on both aisles. We have to get it done. So if you really want to do something, ask. I'll tell you what you need to do. Let's have a one-on-one. Let's talk about what your gifts are, you know, what you can do to kind of move this forward. And I'll be around, so thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. What a gift. Thank you for being with us tonight. One of the questions that we hear a lot, and maybe you have too, is why don't people just come the legal way like they used to? It's a question, trivia question for you that I didn't even know was a question. Of the legal immigrants allowed in the country each year, what % can come from any one country? Did you know that there's a quota based on the total number of immigration visas given out? Only 1% can come from any one country. What percent is that? Well, you know it's not the last one because I just gave it away by explaining the question. But is it 7%, 32%, or 76% of all the people who come can come from any one country? And the answer is, writing it down, holding it in your mind, 7%. Last year, that would have meant 47,000 people could come from any one country. So how many immigration visas could we get for people from Mexico? No more than 47,000. So when someone says, why don't people just come legally? For many, there is no way to come legally. If you were in a situation where your child or your grandchild or your mother or your father was going to die unless you came to this country, that was your option. Would you or would you not consider the limit put on the U.S. by the U.S. government of how many visas they were going to offer be something that would hold you back? I don't know a parent who would say, well, I'm sorry, I can't help my child. Sometimes the question is not, why don't they come the legal way? The question is, why don't we change the legal way? So that's what we're asking people to do, is consider changing the legal way. Juan, you've been thinking about all these things much longer than we have. Thank you for being with us, Juan. Do you want the okay, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.
All right, everyone. Well, good afternoon or good evening at this point. After hearing everyone's stories, I've been thinking about what to share, what not to share, how to give us an approach or a way to advocate and engage. And I still don't know that I've completely figured that out. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, the work that La Casa de Amistad does throughout the entire region, and ideally ways to engage. And so my full name is Juan de Dios Constantino Lara. I was born in Ciudad Madero in Tamaulipas, Mexico. We immigrated to the States in 1998. But prior to my family crossing the border and hiring a coyote to get us across the border, my father was already in the U.S. in Elkhart, working in the RV industry, sending money back and forth so that we could have food on the table for about 3 years. So my dad was already in the States. My mom was in Mexico with my older brother and I. And after 3 years, they ultimately decided that at what point in time are we going to bring our family back together? And so that was in 98. And so then we hired a coyote. My parents could pay for it. We made the trip across the border. And Dora, the work that you do, at some point in time when we had to get food, there was a spot where we stopped and someone fed us. And the woman would buy, in her case, sandwiches or burgers from a restaurant that they could find. In our case, there was a moment where this little boy wouldn't eat because he didn't want a sandwich. He wanted rice and beans because that's what he was used to. So the woman, people like Dora, went out of her way to buy rice and beans so that I, as a 5-year-old boy, would eat food before we continued the trip across the border. We eventually made it to Brownsville, Texas. And then from Brownsville, Texas, we traveled to Elkhart. Didn't stay in Elkhart very long. Eventually traveled and lived in South Bend, Indiana. My father was already in the U.S. for 3 years. He had established his own life. As we saw from some of the stories, he built new relationships. So he and my mother separated. And my father walked out on us and left the country. We've been in the country now 2 years. Undocumented immigrants. My mom doesn't speak English. She doesn't have a driver's license. She's now got 3 boys, doesn't know how to drive, and has one of 2 choices. 1, she stays in the U.S., or 2, she goes back home to where her family is. She made the choice to stay in the U.S. because she had 3 boys that she wanted to make sure could obtain an education and be whatever they wanted to be when they wanted to be it. Because when my mom was in school in Mexico, she only went up to school until the 4th grade. She had a journal and a pencil that had to last her the entire year because the educational system was failing her there. And she didn't want the same thing for us, so we stayed. But we stayed as an undocumented family here in the States. And so as we were growing up, the goal was always, you gotta go to college. You gotta get your education. That way, if you wanna be an engineer or a doctor, you can do it, because this is the country that says we can. And no one can take our education away from us. So my older brother and I are 3 years apart. He was a senior, I'm a freshman. In the state of Indiana, this is a program known as 21st Century Scholars. You're told to fill out this program in 7th and 8th grade. You get 4 years of public education at the university level. If you go to a state school, X, Y, and Z. So we did it because they told us we had to. When my brother went to go claim his 4-year scholarship, they told him that he didn't have a social security number. Therefore, he couldn't. In 2009, there was also a House bill right around that time that said if you were an undocumented immigrant, you would get charged out-of-state tuition as an undocumented immigrant. And that law still stands in the state of Indiana. I also knew when it was my turn to go to college that I would face the same thing. Thankfully so, I was blessed enough to get a scholarship by Holy Cross College, the only college in this entire region that, without shouting it out to the world, was doing the right thing because they knew it was the right thing to do, providing 2 scholarships to undocumented students. And then at some point, the University of Notre Dame and St. Mary's and IUSB and all the other universities eventually stepped up to the plate. But it was the little school that didn't have to say it out loud to show face, but they just did it because it was the right thing to do. And that's important. Throughout my time at the college, I knew I was given a scholarship. I was given an opportunity as an undocumented Latino in the city of South Bend to get my education and hopefully one day be able to make a difference. So I dropped my business degree, picked up a theology degree, and then began to also tell my story as an undocumented immigrant on campus and then eventually on a panel. And on that panel was the executive director of this place known as La Casa de Amistad. And then so we told the story at the St. Joseph County Public Library here in downtown South Bend. As I'm approaching graduation, I've got one of 2 options. 1, go to the University of Missouri, maybe get a job in development and go into fundraising. Or 2, there's this organization known as La Casa de Amistad, hiring a programming assistant, help answer phones, help people build resumes, work with the kids on the summer camps, and fill in the gaps wherever else we could. And what else? It paid a whopping $12.50 an hour. I took the job at La Casa de Amistad over 5 years ago. And you could imagine my mom's dismay of that decision of how we define success as parents. But as the time went on, once a month, my mom would sit me down, once a week, mijo, what are you doing? Are you ready to leave? I'm like, well, no, Mom, like, work's going well. We just took the kids to Michigan State. And then the next week, because we took the kids on a college tour every single Friday, I'm like, and we just took the kids to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And then we just took the kids to University of Detroit Mercy in Detroit. And then we just took the kids to Grand Valley State University. So we are literally changing lives with our teenagers. And then I told Mom, I just helped this woman build a resume because she just got her CDL and she just got a job that's going to pay her $60,000 a year versus being a paraprofessional bus driver where she was getting paid $12,000. So you can imagine how upset that made her as well because she's not making $60,000 a year and I'm making $12,000. This continued, right? My mom, 3 months in, is like, mijo, when are you going to leave La Casa? And I didn't. And at some point in time, she sat me back down and goes, let me talk to you. Okay, Mom. She goes, how's work going? I'm like, it's going well. We just did this, we did that. We're on track to do this. Summer camps just ended. We're getting ready to kick off the school year. She goes, great. You're liking it. I was like, yeah. She goes, let me tell you something. At the moment when your heart is no longer in this work, you leave. Because no one deserves to be, no one deserves to not be welcomed when they come to the doors of La Casa de Amistad. Because when your father walked out on us, that was the food pantry we went to when we needed food. And so it comes full circle and it's personal. And so I've been at La Casa de Amistad now 5 years, and it's a beautiful center. One that's been around for 49 years in October. One that'll be around for 50 years next year, and it'll be a beautiful celebration. One that just moved into a brand new 41,000 square foot facility in June. Our previous facility was 8,000 square feet, In that 8,000 square foot facility, we wrung out every square inch of it. Ran out 13 different programs, a bilingual preschool, K through 12 tutoring, helping folks build resumes, citizenship classes and English classes in a separate space that we rented. We launched a legal immigration clinic with a Department of Justice accredited rep and saw hundreds of folks. We launched a No Human Beings Illegal campaign. Thanks to the help of several leaders in our community, we were able to take on the South Bend ID program, adopt it internally, and expand it to now 5 different cities in the state of Indiana. La Casa de Amistad would see 6,000 people a year. That's a major impact for a small organization our size. In the month of January alone of this year, 5,500 people came to La Casa de Amistad. People ask, how can I get engaged? How can I help? What can we do? I'll be honest, this probably isn't what you want to hear. But showing up isn't enough. Wearing a pin isn't enough. Changing your filter on Facebook isn't enough. But rather, a life of advocacy, not just a moment, even then may not be enough, but may get us to where we need to go to support our community, because the work never stops. So advocacy isn't a moment. It's not where we just advocate one time. Advocacy should be a life lived as an advocate. And that's what I want you all to take away from here today. Coming to the events is great. Learning about the issues is great. Voting, ideally the just way for the common good of the community, is great. But unless we do that all the time, we won't have significant change that'll be long-lasting. So I'm thankful that you're all here. I'm thankful that we'll have this film to tell the stories, but it can't stop here. And you feeling bad for somebody right now and just wearing a pin and showing up to a rally isn't enough. How you invest your money, where you put your time, and what you ultimately act upon may be enough. And you may never see the fruits of those labors, but at the end of the day, a life of advocacy amongst thousands of million people may be enough, and that'll be the only way we do it. Thank you.
It's a gift to be here in South Bend. It's to see the local heroes and also to stand beside folks that are national treasures, friends that we met on the border. I had the chance to go on a piece of the ride. I just got to throw it out there, though. I was only on about like 200 miles. There's other folks that did 3,000 miles. And I started out strong. You know, I got into that thing. I'm like singing my Guns N' Roses, like every rose has its thorn, you know, and then about 50 miles in, I'm hurting. You know, it's beginning to hurt. And then Doug showed me this, he gave me this, well, it's really kind of a leotard with a gel pad, and it was just pure magic. And I got to keep going, and every day the stories became the pedal power. You know, this became the fuel to keep the Freedom Ride going. And you know, as I was going along the border, I saw this wall, and we biked along it, and over, I kept remembering a story that Jesus told. And it's a story that I actually didn't hear preached very much, but it's in the Gospel of Luke. And Jesus told this parable, which, you know, Jesus told a lot of parables. They're stories with a point. And this parable is often called the rich man and Lazarus. And it's the story of these two people who have very different life experiences. One of them is the rich man who's living in a gated world. He's living behind a wall in a life full of luxury and comfort. And right on the other side of the wall is a homeless man suffering deeply And it says that this man's name was Lazarus. And the early Christians, it's interesting, they said, we need to notice that the rich man doesn't have a name and the poor man does. They said, pay attention, right? That in this world, we know the names of all the rich folks. But the point that Jesus is making is that God knows the names of those who are hurting, those who are dying without anyone holding their hand. And as it goes, Jesus tells a story that both the rich man and Lazarus die. And it says that the rich man is separated from God. But the angels come and they rescue Lazarus. And they bring him next to Abraham's side. And he's in heaven near to God. And you see this interchange between the one who suffered so deeply in this world and the rich man who he finds out at the end of the story that the wall that he built between himself and the suffering of the world not only separated him from the poor, but it separated him from God. He had locked himself into hell. And I think of that story and, all the ways that we are conditioned to fear. And the more walls we have, the more we hide behind, we find ourselves separated from the very thing that we are made for, which is love. We're made to love and be loved, to show compassion, to help one another. And I thought as we hear all the stories, that we've heard today, that we are conditioned to fear, right? We're conditioned to fear in a very particular way. And there's a study that was recently done that showed how unreasonable our fears are of many Americans. And one of the things it said was that you are twice as likely to be killed in America by a white supremacist than by a Muslim. You are more likely, they listed all of these things that we are more likely to kill us than immigrants or refugees. And on that list of things more likely to kill us than immigrants or refugees was a cow. And they went on to list roller coasters, lightning, falling down the steps is more likely to kill us than being killed by someone who's entered this country. One of the things that struck me on that list was a vending machine falling on you is more likely to kill you than an immigrant or refugee. And yet, no one's walking around vending machines like, oh, look out. Like we are socialized to fear, right? And there's a beautiful place in the scripture where it says, perfect love casteth out fear. I know I said in church tonight, but you can say amen if you want to. I'm convinced that love and fear are opposites, right? And we have a choice in this country. We can choose fear or we can choose love. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to choose love, right? We have this decision that we get to ask as a country. Are we going to be driven by fear or by love? And can we imagine what this country would look like if love was the compelling force shaping how we thought about immigration policies, how we thought about gun violence, so many other things, right? Let's choose love. And I think as we think of our country that we're faced not just with a political burden, we're faced with a spiritual opportunity that is sacramental. One of the most sacred things that we can do in the world is welcome people who are struggling. The New Testament says that when we welcome foreigners, we are entertaining angels unawares. Jesus said that when you welcome the stranger, you are welcoming me. When you do it to the least of these, you do it unto me. We have an opportunity to show love right now. And I want to share just one last story, because as we were along the border, we interacted with all kinds of different people. This is one of the military folks that was on the border. And there was a lot of heaviness. I mean, right after this, we saw an entire group of people put on the ground and detained. And I remembered this old story I heard from an old preacher, and he said, it was kind of this story of Peter at heaven's gates, and he said all these folks that had passed away and they're waiting to get into heaven, and Peter is there checking the Lamb's book of life, and seeing if their names are there and, letting them enter in. And the angels come up to Peter one day and they say, Peter, we got a little bit of a problem. And Peter said, what? The angels said, we did a little census. We did a little count. And there are more people actually in heaven than we have accounted for in the Lamb's Book of Life. And, Peter said, well, get to the bottom of it. Figure out what's going on. And if sometime later the angels came back and they said, Peter, we figured out the problem. And Peter's like, what is it? And the angel said, it's Jesus. Jesus is on the other side of the wall, lifting people over. Don't get too theological with all that. But I think the whole point, is that God's love is bigger than we can ever imagine. And no wall can hold it back. Our love has to transcend borders. Our love, if we are, as Jesus said, to be born again, is to say, if someone is suffering on the other side of that wall, it's as tragic as if it were my own mom, my own dad, my own daughter, my own son. If they hurt them, they hurt us. So this is not just about people on the other side of a wall. This is about our human family, brothers and sisters who are made in the image of God, who we hope, if we were in a tough situation, they would welcome us too. So let's do better. Let's choose love, not fear. Thank you so much.
Friends, we really appreciate your time. We just have one more person we'd like you to hear from, and then Brandon is going to serenade us with a little song on our way out tonight. Vanessa came along with us on the ride as well, and we'll have a chance to hear from her. You ready? All right. It was just my transition to get that thing in the right spot.
If your heart has been broken tonight, I understand. That was my heart. August 3rd, 2019. I'm a mom, and I was at a Walmart, and I had gone back to school shopping with my kids. I have kids that are the age of some of y'all up there, and I have a little one. And I got a news alert on my phone that there had been another shooting. And as the details of that shooting came out more and more, I began to be absolutely wrecked. Because we found out that that shooter had been very motivated by the current administration. And that before he got in his truck and drove across the state of Texas for 10 hours, he laid out his weapons on the floor and spelled out the name of somebody and took a photo of his guns shaping that name. I think you know that name. I don't need to say it. And then the eyewitnesses told us that when that shooter went through the store in El Paso, that he would pass over white people so that he would have more bullets to kill brown people. So it was very easy to imagine myself in that store. I live in Arkansas, but it's not that far away, and everywhere I go, I see Confederate flags, so it wouldn't be a big leap, because that shooter would have passed over me, and my husband, and our 2 older kids, and probably our youngest too. But, you know, not really knowing who we were, he would have shot my daughter, my Charlie, my Latina, who we adopted. And I could not get that image out of my head, that my whiteness cannot protect my brown daughter from the hate that has been stirred up in this country. This hate and fear and rage. And I didn't know what to do. About a month later, Vote Come and Good organized an experience at the border. I didn't know what I was going to do there. I just got on a plane and went, because that's how troubled I was. And when we went, I was able to go to see the place where the memorial had been built. It went on the length of a football field, and people were still coming to mourn their dead.
We held a vigil for them. Oh, there were these girls that sang this beautiful song, and I was reminded of it when we heard the color song in the video. And then we went to the wall, that ugly, just menacing, it's a menacing structure. And I was reminded when I saw it, a month before, I had taken my son to college in New York City, and I had gone to see the Statue of Liberty because I'd never seen it before and I wanted to, because my great-grandmother, when she was 16 years old alone, had passed through Ellis Island, my Ukrainian grandmother. And so I wanted to see what her experience was like, and I held those two images in split focus in my mind, that wall and Lady Liberty. And then we were able to attend a congressional hearing there in the district and hear from their policymakers, hear from witnesses and people, attorneys that were trying to help the asylum cases and the overload that they were experiencing and the help that they needed and the way they needed our policymakers to act. And I remember a particular story that really struck me was that the locals there in El Paso were grief-stricken, hearts broken, when Border Patrol had shot an 8-year-old girl across the Rio Grande River. And there will be no justice because Border Patrol is not under our congressional or our constitutional law. They're under Homeland Security, so they can do whatever they want. And I remember going back to my room that night in the quiet of the desert, that incredible calm and the way the wind blows. And I had a conversation with God because I knew I needed to do something, and yet at the same time I was just floored and horrified because I'm just one person. I'm an ordinary person. I'm just a mom with an Etsy shop and some friends. I am not rich. I am not influential. I don't have special skills. I am not a fundraiser. What could I possibly do, and what could I possibly say to try to say something? No one is going to believe me. And in that quiet, I heard God's voice, as plain as day, say, "You haven't said anything yet." And so I started talking. I was able to go out on the 2020 tour and be able to participate in helping to get a new presidential administration started, and that's a step in the right direction, but we still need to keep going. I also, I started making, because I can communicate through what I make. You see, I'm a broken china mosaic artist. I am used to taking things that are broken and turning them into something else. And I had this vision for this piece that began to grow in my mind. And it was a kind of wall of my own that I wanted to build, and it was in my imagination. And about that same time, my friend Doug, who is also a kind of artist, he's a performance artist, thought up this idea of bringing awareness to this situation by riding bikes across the southern border all the way to St. Augustine, Florida. And I'm an artist, I'm not an athlete, but I decided to go. And so I went back to Texas, and I rode in Texas. I rode 250 miles in Texas. I rode, and I met Alma, and I saw those women in that restaurant, those moms, just like me, who wanted to do whatever they could to protect their kids. I held them in my arms, and I can't speak Spanish, it's muy malo, but I could hear their hearts. I could hear their hearts. And from there I went home, and then I went back and I rode in Florida, and I rode another 250 miles. So I rode 500 miles with legs that are not built for bicycling, but I did it. And I was able to reach the ocean, dip my toes in the water, and have that celebration. And that very next morning, when everything was quiet and we had finished the ride, I got this very rare opportunity, and you got a little taste of it tonight. I got to sit with Dora, That was my first time to meet her. And I got to sit with Alma Ruth and another woman who all work in the desert, these women. And we had no agenda. We were just women hanging out, telling our stories, very relaxed, waiting for our airport shuttle. And the hour that we spent together was like church for me, because they were just telling their stories. They were just casual. And what I found out was that all of them had done what they were supposed to do. They had followed the rules. They had made wise choices. They had done what you're supposed to do, and yet they had still been betrayed. They had been disappointed. They had experienced domestic abuse. Their churches had failed them. The organizations that should have had their backs did not support them. And yet, that very brokenness is what sent them back out into the desert to love and serve. And I was reminded of a biblical story. I spent 25 years in church ministry, and that story that came to mind was about a woman in the desert. She had the wrong color skin for some people. She had been trafficked. She was stuck in a system that was not for her. She had been used sexually, humiliated. And twice she found herself on the edge of death in the desert. Once when she was pregnant, about as vulnerable as can be. And the second time she was there in the desert, and she placed her child under one of those scrubby bushes because he was going to die, and she could not bear the thought of watching. Her name in Hebrew means slave. In Islam, it means beautiful nurturer. Her name is Hagar. Hagar does something that, as far as I know, nobody else does in the biblical story. Usually, when people have an encounter with God, God names them. God gives them a new name. God says, you're going to be this. You're going to have this future. In the biblical story with Hagar, what she does is very interesting. She names God. She gives God a name. And she names him, her, the God who sees. My job as an artist is to help you see. If God sees, we need to see. And so I'm doing whatever I can to help you see. I'm giving you a chance tonight to see something that not very many people have seen yet. This is what I built. This is what I made. It is 7 panels of a wall with spaces between. Like a calendar, you know, because we keep saying, well, we just need to get through the week, and we have Sunday and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday happens, and, you know, then we have to get through the hump day of that week. And we come back to thoughts and prayers and start all over again. It's also a map because it's made out of, you probably can't see this very well, but it's made out of souvenir plates from the states of our country, because we're a little broken. And so there's Texas there, and there's Arkansas where I live, and there's Indiana up there on the other side where you are. It's also made out of Mother's Day plates for the mothers whose hearts are broken. This is going to be in a museum in Washington, D.C. in the fall. It's called Rend and Remember. And hopefully it's a way that more people can see. And they can let themselves interact with how broken they feel. Listen, if you are feeling broken tonight, that is okay. That is okay. In fact, it's probably good. If you let yourself sit with that and live with it, then you're going to figure out how to be part of the mosaic to make things better. You're going to figure out your small piece to make things more beautiful. Everybody loves to think that I make my mosaics like that film where I climb up on a 10-foot ladder and drop a plate and smash it. That's not how I make a mosaic, because you can't make anything beautiful out of violence. And you can't heal a mother's broken heart, not even with $333 billion. Thanks.
Thanks. We know we've kept you late tonight, but we're really glad that you're here. We'd love to take you with us any way we can. If you have a piece of paper, maybe one we gave you or something else, and you want to drop it at the table downstairs, we'd like to stay in touch with you. We'll tell you about when the documentary is going to come out. We would like to tell you next time maybe we're going to go to the border and we're going to ride, or we're going to go somewhere. We want to stay in touch because maybe you're doing something. So Brandon's going to sing us out here, and when he's done, you're welcome to meet us down at the tables and say hello. If you want to make a donation to this documentary and want to become part of the documentary team, we'd be excited for you to do that. If you want to support the work of Alma and Dora and others, we'll meet you down at the table as well. So thank you for being here. Brandon's going to get himself all together. Brandon was along the ride as well. In fact, I don't have the clicker anymore. Would you give that a little? Yeah, thank you. So Brandon was along on the ride as well. Pardon me, I don't know what I'm doing here. And Brandon not only rode some days, but he drove our support vehicle. So did Tim Gilman, who you see around here. Tim was there on the support vehicle because it takes a lot of people to help people move around. And so sometimes the support vehicles, for any of us who are in the midst of it, are so important. So we'd love for you to be part of the support vehicle for the people who are in these experiences and doing this work. So thank you from all of our hearts for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Oh, where is the justice? Where is the justice we need? Tell me, where is the justice we all want to see? And when I marched in the street, I began to see, I saw that the justice we need is the justice that needs me. Tell me, where is the healing? Where is this healing we need? Oh, please, where is the healing we all want to see? 'Cause when I turn on my TV, I still see so much war and disease. I see that the healing we need is the healing that needs me. Tell me, where is the peace that, where is the peace that we need? Oh, please, where is the peace that we all want to see? And so I phoned up an old friend. I said, I'm so sorry for this grief. I know that the peace that we need is the peace that needs me. us tonight, come and hang out with us at the tables below.